This is probably the most famous drawing in the Western world. One of the most famous drawings in the Western world, the drawing of Michelangelo's. This is a copy that I took and made of the drawing. The original drawing is approximately about this size. It's only 11 3/4 by 8 and something. And it's at the Metropolitan Museum of New York. Now, what makes this drawing so interesting is that it is a part of a process. This drawing was not done for the sake of the drawing by itself. The purpose of doing this drawing was to take and create this great big mural. Now, what the Renaissance artists had to do to take and create these monumental works, hundreds and hundreds of figures, was they had to be fantastically organized. They had to have a definite system and approach to taking and doing the drawing. Now, this necessitated, obviously, to being very logical and rational. They had to have a plan to take and do the drawing. They had to be able to take and literally almost do these things in their sleep. They did not work from models most of the time. Now, this drawing here originally was done from a model. Although it was done, it's obviously it's of a female, but Michelangelo used a male back and then put a female head on it. And he kept working on this drawing. As you can see, some of the things I've done here, these are, again, exact replicas of the Michelangelo drawing. Now, he kept working and trying to change and adjust and to correct. Now, as a procedural approach to doing this drawing, which what we're talking about today, is a method of doing a drawing, is that he had to be very, very clear of the spatial elements of the drawing. He had a very definite way of doing it. Now, the first thing he did, and I'm going to take and do some diagramming here, is that if we take and look at this arm here, particularly to start with. Now, most people look at these drawings and they say, well, gee, it's all this anatomy, all this muscle. But in reality, the most important stuff about it is the analytical aspect of the drawing itself. Now, if we take this drawing here and start adding this arm into a little bit I've sketched in here, we can look and start to see that this basically is a cylindrical form that's going through. And let me do it a little larger here. That arm goes back in space. This is what he's trying to take and communicate. This very, very simple cylinder going back in this way and taking and going like this. Okay. Now, he communicates this by the way he ends the form. If you come down here and you look, you can see as he draws that elbow area on the inside of the elbow, he's definitely using the line to take and draw a cylinder. We can take a simple straight line from starting here at where the clavicle comes through and carries through here. There's a definite simple straight line here. So the first part of this thing is to see that form is simple. So there's a base simple line. He's finding the end of the form here. Coming across, we pick up the condyles on the end of the bone here. He draws it just almost like a square. He takes and shows us the direction. So he's thinking of a cylinder. You're coming across, hitting the corners of the form. And here, it tells us that this arm is going here. As we go down the arm through here, for instance, you look at the wrist, he literally draws a circle an oval circle around to show what this is. He's drawing that shaft of that arm to begin with. Now, I'm not exaggerating by being so diagrammatical. In the originals, when you look at them very carefully, you can see that this is literally what he has done. For instance, we look at the way the arm goes up and fits into this hand here. This is what he's done. It's a complete oval, taking and diagramming how that fits in there. Okay, now, as we start to build the form on top of this, we use that simple straight line as a structure that we build upon, so that now as we start to take and add muscles on here, we can look at the point and say, okay, we've gotten our length of the form, we've got the width of the form across. Now we start to take and build on top of this. We say that okay, between this point and this point, we got so many bumps that we have to take and put in here. Regardless if we're talking about muscles or what, it doesn't make any difference. We have so many bumps that have to take in here. We say, okay, the first part, now this is actually being the deltoid here, we take and say, okay, the deltoid is coming, starts here and comes down about halfway and pulls through here. Okay, now there's two breaks. You can see there's two bumps in this deltoid that take place up here. There's two halves. These take and the way he's using the axis across here again helps us to show which way that arm is going. He's taking and fitting one form on top of the next. Okay, we come in now, we get the bicep working through here. Again, he's pulling off this basic line and he's building up and stepping down in. This allows us a certain sense of structure to the whole thing. It's the idea that if you just take and do a series of wavy lines, it looks just like a series of wavy lines. But if you build those on a straight, we actually feel the way those forms rise off of that base. So we give them something to work. It gives a feeling of structure to the whole thing now. Okay, as he goes back into here, we find that he does sort of the same thing. He's taking a simple oval type form and he starts to build upon that a larger simplified mass, like a big lump of clay on a cylinder. So we're getting this thing here. So the drawing then is built up this way. It takes some first large, simple masses. Okay. Gets the directions. And like what he did with this drawing here, he jumped it a little bit farther. Now this was done after the original is done here. Here we have the drawing. He's holding up a book. The arm is up high. To get the feeling for the weight, he takes, and later on, which is the way it is actually in the Sistine Chapel, this arm is lowered. So he continues to keep working on this drawing and trying to take alternate ways of taking and seeing it. So he drops this arm down. So the first thing is simple placement, where he's going, analyzing. The drawing is an analysis, builds simple shapes on top, thinking of the structure. Same thing on the bottom of the arm. He has a length, feels where this fits into the rib cage down in here. We think first length, then we can pull from that. We feel there are the triceps in the back pulling through, and we also start to now take and complete shapes. We try to feel these large shapes. We feel the shape of the scapula, the muscles that pull off the scapula, the tricep pulls across. You feel the trapezius muscles pulling down. And he slowly takes and builds it up, shape upon shape upon shape. But he's always, as I started to indicate here, he's always thinking of the three-dimensional form. Now, it's carried even farther. We take and go back and look at the head now. You look at the drawing and you see this head is tilted towards us. Now, why do we see that it's tilted towards us? Well, first of all, he takes and makes a point out of showing the ellipse of the head, which I've done here just by drawing a simple ellipse right now, but he does it by taking and lining up the brow line, giving us that angle to show which way that head is tilted. The fact that we take and are looking down at the nose shows us the angle. The fact that the mouth, the angle of the mouth goes along with the angle of the brow. The fact that we see the top of the eyes looking down. All of this helps us to see that we're looking down at the top of the head. The fact, the way he takes and diagrams the form on the top here. We can feel the corner. So he couldn't have shown it more clearly than if he had taken and just simply drawn a box. If he had taken and just said, this is a side of a form, this is something coming across here, what he's done is just as clear. Now, the fact that the head is twisting, again, he's very, very direct about this. First of all, we get a series of lines that take and show how the forms wrap around the neck. Okay, again, these are lines that if you had a tin can, these lines wrapping around that surface, that tin can, tell us that surface is round, which direction it is tilting. Okay, these lines going around the neck do exactly the same thing, pulling over that form. Also, the fact now that the head is turning, we're getting a tension. We feel that corner of that jaw pushing up against the neck. Okay. So as he's going through this, it's a continually analyzing, diagramming, trying to make this thing understandable. Now, as we start working across the back going this way, you find that he has a series of forms that are taken fitting one into the other. As we look at the shoulder here now, we find that what he's done, very clearly again, he just diagrammed, using a series of forms here, how this thing fits into that arm. So we get pulling it through here. Now we can see the deltoid, again, fitting down, pushing into this. We feel the shape. First, of course, he took this very, very simple form in here. Picks up the bones, the end of the bone, to take and show that the fact that this other arm now is going this direction. We feel the corner of the elbow in here. Picks up this coming through. One form fitting into the other. Get the trapezius muscles up here taking and pushing down into the scapula. Everything, one thing fitting into the next. It's going back, going over, surface, coming down. Okay. Now, in this drawing, what he did now, this is basically what we've done so far, just sort of the underpinnings of the drawing. From here, he takes and starts to take and define each form a little bit farther. So he takes and, say in the shoulder area now, he would take and start to, just basically render the form. But rendering the form is not necessarily copying the light and dark. What it's doing is defining a little more clearly what the form itself is doing. Now, Michelangelo was primarily a shape artist. He would take and work with those shapes and build things. Now, what I'm doing here is different than what he did. I'm taking and sort of drawing the form by using a tone, going over, around the edges, building it up. What he did in his drawing was to take and use a series of cross-hatching lines that would take and go all in the same direction across the form. And then he would come back and cross-hatch this way. Okay. The drawing, of course, now you have to realize, was done. It was very, very small. It's only, the original drawing is no more larger than, say, this. So you condense this whole thing down, so I've got it here almost twice the size of the original. After he had taken and rendered the form, developed it, polished it, really taken and worked all its cross-hatching out, modeled, built up one form on top of another, he then came down and actually came in and rubbed it with his fingers and smoothed it out and built it up and came back in and worked with a little bit of white on top of it. Now, what I want to do is to take and do another drawing from beginning to end using the same basic procedures. Now what I'm going to do here is a drawing that I did the other night in class. This drawing was from a model, obviously, and was basically using the same procedure. Taking and starting with a very, very simple lay-in, building up the shapes, and then rendering the form. So I'm going to take and jump from that and try to take and see if I can show you how I'm using the same thinking carrying through this. Okay, first primary consideration is getting the feeling for the gesture, getting the total. But first I try to take and feel shape of the head, primary concern for the structure, feeling where ellipses are. Now I'm drawing a little darker than I would normally do so that you can see it. Okay, feeling the way the head pulls out of the neck pulls out of the head there. Feel curvature, spine. Now this line, though, from this pose is pretty much the line of the spine. It is not necessarily meant to be an anatomical line. It's more of a line that takes and communicates what the gesture is. We're taking feeling what the whole action is. And the lines that you put down at this stage will actually disappear as you take and work. Get the angle across the shoulders, the feeling, the line across the hips, check your verticals. Okay. So I start pulling from here now, I start to see the shape, feeling the neck, basically a simple cylinder fitting into the head. Okay. Now, as you're doing this, you have to be careful that you are always thinking round. Because as I'm drawing here, okay, this line here, it shows graphically, as I'm diagramming here, that this is fitting into the head, but in my mind, I'm taking and saying, that's a cylinder going in that space. Like, for instance, if the most extreme example of this would be, say, an artist by Cambiaso, who took and literally drew forms as boxes. Okay. Feel the angle, shape of the shoulders coming down. Feel the rib cage inside. It's anatomical and non-anatomical. The thing that I'm more concerned with than it being a rib cage is that it's a volume. Okay, like for instance here, now what I want to think about is the mass of the pelvic area rather than worry about whether it is precisely anatomical. Okay. Think, okay, now I will be a little more careful, start thinking, okay, where does the actual bone come through here? Where do I feel clavicle coming through that I see from the front? I try to feel where I want the shoulder to come back. I want to feel where the end of the scapula is coming through. Take and draw the shape of the scapula. Again, the same thing that the idea of Michelangelo, taking and drawing the shape. The procedures don't change. Artist times, what the kind of drawing, the kind of look that the art takes may change, but the methods don't really change that much. Okay. Feeling the muscles pulling around over the surface, down. Now here, getting and feeling the dimples on the back, pelvis pushing up. Now I'm going to be doing this drawing in roughly 30 minutes. Now this is considered a very, very quick drawing still. 30 minutes is a fast drawing. I think it was Robert Henry at the turn of the century was saying how, gee, the hour pose is a great invention. It allowed people to learn how to start drawings. And so you could take, like I'm sure Michelangelo in doing his drawing probably spent a minimum of a couple of hours on it, because very, very carefully done. Now, I'm not trying to equate myself with Michelangelo. All I'm trying to do is talk about the procedure that he took and did on this thing. Okay. Okay, now here, as I'm doing this, when you're analyzing the pose at the same time, the weight is on the right leg. So you want to feel this pressure of this leg picking up. So I take and feel that by, or communicate that by the fact that this leg is going to be pushed up. The buttocks are going to be lifting in here. You're feeling a thrusting out of the hip. On the other side, we get the buttocks taking and dropping down and in. Feel the hip. Here, the idea is you have to very clearly see the symmetry that's taking place, that I'm forcing this side up. As we start pulling up here, this side over here is dropping down. This is pushing up. You have to feel that sort of a box type feeling in that form. Okay, now, as in drawing the arm of a Michelangelo, we have this leg that is taking and going back in. I want to pay particular attention to how I make one form fit into the other, and it's basically, it's this. You have something like this, taking and fitting into something like that. Pushing, wedging one form into another. So you use the anatomical forms to take and communicate this. So I take and try to feel this coming in, and the first step, I do just this. I take and simply diagram it. Okay, next, as I start working down that leg, I've already got the gesture, the very, very simple what's going on here. Okay. Next, I take and where does this take and fit in? Where does the line start? Where does the knee go? If I want to jump down here and pick out a spot, okay, take it in simple straight line, find my length, establish my length, then take and establish width, establish the length here, so that you only think about one thing at a time. Now, it may seem like I'm going all over the place here, but if you notice, I really am just thinking about one thing each step as I'm going through. First, it was feeling for the gesture. Next, I'm taking the shapes, and I'm systematically going down through the figure. Because I've already got my placement. I've already got my major length already set up. Okay, so I'm taking from here. Now I want to take the lower part of the leg. Again, it's the same idea here now, except that the leg is coming towards us, so I'm taking and again, it would be like a tin can, taking and coming out. I just drawing. This is the basic idea, how that fits into the knee. Okay, length, width, length, and primarily with straights to begin with. Once I have my straights, then I can take and build upon those. I know I can look at this distance from here to here and say, okay, now where does that curve take place on that point? And I say, well, okay, it's just a little bit below halfway. So I know that from here to here is where that's got to cover. So as I draw this now, I take and say, okay, I've got that solved. Now, as I'm doing this, so I'm also immediately thinking of the other side of the form, of going over and around that form. I'm pulling down, feeling that form come through, feeling the ankle bone, feeling the shape of that Achilles tendon coming down, feeling where the heel is. And it's a very, very simple shape, the foot to begin with. Check across where the other knee is now. First, again, simple straight, coming down, straight, width. Take your time. Feel that pull through. Okay. Again, coming down, where is my ankle? I take and I check to see where my verticals are, where this form would be pulling through. Now, working from the model, I would be taking a lot of pains to take and to see where the one form is fitting to the next, to check across from where one form is to the next this way, to look at the shapes that are being created between forms. Through. Now here, I just automatically did it. I came down, okay, the length, I came in and I drew that through. Feeling here, right away, see, across the other side, checking bits of anatomy, For instance, right away realizing that the outside of the calf is high, the inside of the calf is low, and just the reverse situation on the ankle. Okay, it's high, low, and primarily being aware of how this one form fits into the other. Ankle bone, feel the through, foot going back in. Now, same thing applies to taking and working with the arm. We want to take and primary thing start with, okay, placement, where the end of that elbow is in relationship to everything else. Try to feel this corner coming down and to look at the angles. Again, it's like the Michelangelo in that you use the bone to take and show which direction a form is going. Like we try to see that as I come across here, this arm is coming out, that it's like a box. We try to feel this sort of box type form taking place through here. We feel a corner like that. Now what I'm trying to do now in using these bones is to see this corner and that corner. So I come down, I get my length, my width. I'm coming across that bone the same way. I want to feel that to there. And I'm see, now here it's more or less the top. Okay, it's coming across. So I've that corner, and we pick up the end of the humerus here, coming through this way, and then the hand taking and going down to the hip. Again, we draw that wrist. It's a diagramming around the form. Okay. We've got the width up here, with the length across. Okay. Placement of how this takes and starts to fit in. Okay. Now, this is the basic lay-in to the drawing. Now from here, we take and start to develop and render the form a bit more. Now, first thing you have to take in consideration, there's two essential ways that we can take and treat the form. One is what we refer to as indirect lighting, and the other is a direct lighting. Now, the Michelangelo here this is primarily an indirect lighting source of form, in that what he's done is that all the forms in here that are facing you are in light, and as they turn away, they go into tone. Granted, he does have a light source and what have you that's going on up here. Now, I'm going to do pretty much the same idea. It's a combination of both. You take and your primary thing that you render the form with is indirect, but you take and show the large masses by having a direct light source. So the light source in the drawing that I did is coming down something like this. Okay, now this is really useful, and you don't try to copy what you're doing. Again, is that you have to always remember, in a drawing, you're trying to communicate what's up there, and the drawing is a process of analyzing what's going there. If you understand what it is that you're taking and drawing, if you understand it clearly, it is communicated in the drawing. So that you're always trying to go through, it's a process of learning. So I always think of this basically as an approach for learning how to draw. Okay, now first, let's take the most simple thing here, as you can see very clearly. We want the scapula to take and come out. It's fitting on this simple round form. So as I go over the surface, I take and, using the broad side of the charcoal, I go over and I'm taking and pushing the form back. Now as I'm doing this, you can start to see that scapula starts to stick out. And we want this whole plane of this top of the shoulder to take and go back in. Pulls this out, sets this back up. So we want to describe the whole thing. So we'll come back here now. I'll pick up the trapezius, which takes and will come through and fits into the neck. Pulls over that surface. And again, in drawing this, I'm doing the same kind of tin can type of thing here. I'm taking and going over, showing the direction that form is going. Okay. Fitting in. And technically, in terms of just the handling of the charcoal, it's going from a line to a tone, taking it from a line to a tone. Okay. Now we pull from here, and the other side. Feel this muscle pulling down off of the neck, fitting out of here. Feel first. I already have the simple shape. This very, very simple line. Or I've got from here. I've already got the placement set up here, so I don't have to worry about trying to figure out where this thing is going. Now I just have to take and describe that form itself. So I want to take and show that we have a form that is going over that surface sort of this way. So first, I try to start that line. I know I want to end up on that line. I'm coming out here to the end of the scapula, and I pick up and lift that line so you can feel that muscle. Okay, come over. Okay, I'm going to come across and draw the top edge of the scapula here. Step the corner, going underneath. Again, I'm drawing is a bit darker than I would normally. Shape the scapula, hitting the top edge, because what we want to do now is to make us feel the edge of this scapula coming out. So now, as I've got the top part going back, but the front edge I draw by drawing primarily the muscles in here and the roundness of the rib cage itself. So as I'm doing this tone, okay, now you're getting definite. Well, let's push this a little bit farther to make it a little more clearer, my point right here. Okay, you can see very clearly we have this is sticking out. We step down to here. This is facing us. It's in light. We step down, step up, and step down. So I'm using the tone to take and show these sort of steps going back in space. Okay, pull the scapula out a bit more. Feel the roundness of the rib cage coming through. Now it's important in drawing the rib cage particularly that you don't get isolated into thinking about just one segment of that form. You have to always be thinking of the whole form. And in fact, we say you should really be thinking of the center of the form. And you're just taking and drawing points around the outside edge. Okay. So here, and it may be like I've only got a fragment here. I have a fragment of the rib cage over here, but I've already got the feeling of it by these lines sort of imply. I'm doing this, I'm doing this. I don't have to draw a line completely around. The eye will take and pick it up. Here, hit the center of the neck, bones are picking a bit of the spine, feeling the corner. Now, part of this, I'm just sort of showing you the rendering part of this, but as you're doing this, you should still be concentrating on feeling the basic rhythm as we're going through. So as I'm doing this, I want to feel this. I want to feel this hip coming out. So I'm going to take and if you start to push, okay, feeling this, you may start to modify these things, start to force it even a bit more. Take and use these muscles coming over. We feel the flank pad, for instance, taking and pulling over that hip. And I'm thinking in terms of large masses. I'm thinking of this as like a cylinder that's wrapping, a piece of hose that's taking and wrapping around. You want to see it's like this, this, and this going over that surface. So you can feel that form pulling through. Okay, we can take and pick up the corner of that scapula, and I'm pushing this a bit more to make us really feel that it's sticking out, feeling the pressure in there. Feel the muscles pulling underneath, coming through. And again, it's not strictly anatomical. It's really quite abstract in terms of what I'm doing. It's just lines that take and communicate a certain attitude of the volume, of the masses here. Okay, now I want to bring this shoulder up. And we start to force these forms going underneath. through. Push this a bit more. Feel the shape. Deltoid starting way back here on the scapula. Feel this taking and coming, wrapping over, going over, attaching. The scapula, down, fitting in. Okay. Fitting in here. Pushing through. I've already got my width and length worked out here, so I've got a lot of the problems already taken. I can really just concentrate now on these secondary forms. Feeling the corner. So we ought to give her a breast back there somewhere. Okay. Feel the muscles pulling down, the sacrospinalis pulling down here. Feel the turning into the sacrum here. Secondary forms. Large shapes, small shapes. Okay. We feel the buttocks, you're trying to go over the surface form here. The shape. Try to feel this. Okay, the hip is fitting into this form here. And you can see very graphically now how this takes and really just pulls out. Just pulling in, muscle through, the overlapping. We feel the rib cage, and we see this coming behind. Here. Fullness of the buttocks. Okay. Now, here, okay, we talked earlier, we've got the weight pushing up, thrusting up against the hip here. Okay. Now, when I was working from the model doing the original drawing here, there was a shape that practically none of the students particularly saw. This was done as a classroom demonstration. The first thing you see, most people would look at this and say, well, okay, that buttocks comes down and it just sort of does this. But there was much more to it. There was actually two shapes. You had first, you had a pull that came across like this, and then from that large major form, we had a secondary form that was taking and coming down and pinching through in here. So we had the overlapping subtleties taking place. We also have, as we're doing this, now we've taken care, the next buttocks was overlapping there, pulling out of that. Being careful to see which form comes in front of what. Okay, the inside of the thigh was coming through in here, and then the other leg was coming behind that. But in terms of creating space, being very careful to see what comes in front of what. It's taking your time, really pushing, saying like this, to this, to this, to this. Okay. Now, here, then even more. Next form below this was stepping down even farther. You feel that pulling in. Notice that everything goes around. Okay. Okay. Length, width. From here, okay, start to feel, I can take now, take an add-on, we start to feel this is coming in front. We feel a bit of the thigh coming out from behind, pulling through, and here. Down. Okay. Bit of the bone. Here. Now, since I've already laid it in, I can have the chance of going back and looking at it again and to see these secondary forms a little more clearly. Coming across on this side, I can feel the straightness of this, the turn, feel that bone in there, and in fact now that this is pulling into that. The shape, the back of the leg, and using the broad side of the charcoal, drawing that shape, it also takes and renders that form. Feel this coming down. Okay. And going over surface. Look at Michelangelo's, look at the Rubens. Draw from them. You'll be surprised at how many of these kind of just diagrammatical lines that they take and actually have in their drawings. Okay. Here, shape Bring down first, the same kind of thing that we had over here. One big shape coming down like this, the form coming across. Then a secondary form pulling through here. And then the whole thing stepping down and fitting into the thigh. And here, you can actually taking and dropping this back and tone, getting it going even more. Now I could take and push the tone a little bit more here. From here, yeah, it's going back down in. Take, pull down, think around the form, over, fitting in. Now again, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit the volume here, but that doesn't hurt. Okay. Feel that simple straight coming through. It gives you a sense of structure. It's a visual structure. Gives a sense of solidity through it. Okay. Come down, pushing in. Okay. Fitting in. Go back up here. Around that arm. Went back in. Now, again, I started out with simple, straight forms. Now I want to start fleshing it out a bit. Take a feel, put it over that surface, come across, feel around both sides, going down, feeling the back of the wrist, and here, let's get a little bit of the hand, and here. The other hand was actually coming across, she was holding on to it. And we could take and drop this whole area into tone, get it to set back. The basic idea is just like we were drawing here. If this was a box, we wanted to take and show that in tone, we would just take and drop. Because the primary purpose of this thing is to take and show the change in direction. When you draw a box, when we take and draw a box like this, what you're doing is these lines take and do nothing more than to show the change of a direction of a flat surface here. It shows a change of, shows boundaries of forms. Well, this is exactly what we're doing. I'm taking and showing boundaries of forms. I'm taking and showing that we've got a side, or just drawing a simple shape here. Drawing a shape, I'm saying this is the top, it takes and steps down at that point. Over here, where we get a change of tone, it has a change of surface. Okay. So let's take and carry on a little bit farther down here. Okay. Coming down, picking up here, trying to feel. Now here's where, for instance, if you've looked at a Rubens or even the Michelangelo, you find where they would take and really go out of their way to take and actually draw that calf muscle to show how that thing would fit in. Feel the heel. Now here, taking and drawing the pad of the foot, the edge of the pad of the foot. Feel the arch, the top, and the underside fitting down. And again, just using the tone to show a change in that direction of that form. Again, emphasize the line a bit, come through, over, remember that the ankle bone on the outside is low, the calf on the outside is high. It's also always a good idea to take and use some kind of tone to indicate where we are on the ground, to get a feeling for sort of the space that the figure is actually standing in. Okay, let's go back up here to the head. Now, here I would try to take and do a little bit of pulling around. So now that fits in. I'm going to see that the neck, well, first of all, let's go up here to the head here, the jaw. Feel the corner of the jaw to take and really helps us to show the direction that the head is going. Drawing the underside of the jaw, feeling the shape of the chin going back so you can see very clearly that it's underneath, then to feel how the neck is fitting into that area, how we feel the sternocleidomastoid muscles taking and pulling in front. We pick up the ear to show the rim of the ear, because it helps to take and show, again, the direction that the head is going. Put the shape first of the hair. And you don't try to draw individual strands of hair. You're primarily concerned with shape to begin with. Here, pick up the corner of the cheekbone coming down, roughly the masseter bone here, or the muscles. Again, I'm using the tone here to take and describe, picking up a little bit of the nose, indication of the upper eye bit. Remember, this is still a quick sketch. Okay, now, one thing I haven't really done too much of, just sort of roughly indicated about, is talked about the source of light. Now, I have, in that I've been pushing all of my tone primarily to the left-hand side. Now I can take and come in and emphasize this some more. I can take and start to push this and start to work with what we call the core. Okay, through, and start dropping some of these areas in tone, and we can really, it's going over, and primarily I can use the cast shadow from this arm to take and really describe what's going on in here. Now remember that the difference between a cast shadow and what we call a modeling tone, this is what primarily this is, a modeling tone. I'm using this tone to take and model the form, to take and develop it, show the, well, just to show the form. So it is determined by the darkness of the tone is determined by the way the surface goes. The cast shadow always has a sharp edge. This. And you can see the difference right away. This is soft, it feels round, it feels fleshy. It's a little harder where I've got a bone sticking out. But the cast shadow takes and is dark, sharp, right next to the form that's casting it, and as we get away, it may soften up a little bit. But it's a tool for showing that surface. It's just the same thing as taking and drawing a line around a tin can. A label on a tin can describes that surface. The cast shadow does the same purpose for us. Very clearly shows what that surface is doing. Okay, here I can come in and start to push the corner a bit. And for the sake of clarity, I would probably take and, since I want this leg here going back in, I would take and put this whole leg, top part of the leg there anyway, in tone. And use a cast shadow. Now this is a little different from the drawing that I did there earlier, but I want to take and push the point a little bit more. Feel, it's coming down, here. Okay, same thing here. Now I want to take and make these buttocks a little even rounder. Start to feel forms pulling out. I can take and drop some tone. You see how easy it is to start giving a light source after I've gone through and basically built the form up in an indirect light fashion. Okay, through. Start picking up a bit more the shoulder, feeling some of these muscles. Now, I could take and go on and on and on in terms of describing these forms. Now, we could come in and start picking up secondary forms, and even going way, way down, start picking up all kinds of little things. The thing that you have to be careful of is to take and maintain your values throughout the whole thing. So nothing becomes any more important than anything else. Now, what I'm going to do is to take and use a little bit of white chalk on this paper to start bringing out some of the forms. Now, primarily, my first consideration would be to take and emphasize the structure. I want to take and you feel things coming, pushing to the surface. Like we want to feel an elbow taking and pulling out. I want to feel that form coming out. So just a little bit. Even when this white is so close to the color of the paper, it doesn't take very much. It just takes a little bit, and you're going to start to see the forms pushing. You know, if I was working on a darker paper, it would even be more extreme. But that's not my point today. I just want to take a little bit, pull it out a little bit more, starting to just heighten it, pick up the form back here. It's not necessarily the thing that's closest to you, but the thing that is facing you, and the forms that are protruding. Push out, through, down, pick out, over the surface, down. Now from here, I'll go back and just start to emphasize a little bit more, to pull out. Now, I look at the drawing and I say, well, I could really start to make, I want to make more. The main gesture of this thing is this sort of curve that starts taking place. So I would come in and start to see if I could maybe force it a bit more. Start to say, okay, this, start finding forms that are going to go along with that. Maybe push something through here. And again, if you take a look at the drawings of the old masters, look at the Michelangelos, look particularly at the unfinished drawings, the drawings that he's done again and again and again. And you're going to find, if you look at the unfinished drawings, you're going to find that there is more time spent trying to take and work out basic movements, overall feelings, that the actual highly rendered drawings are really very, very few and far between. And in fact, in the case of Michelangelo, the only really rendered drawings that we know of are drawings that he took and gave as presents to friends. You know, with very few exceptions, because the drawing was not necessarily something to be done for itself. It was part of a process of creating something greater. It was part of the assets of the shop. In fact, when an artist would die, the drawings would go along with the shop. They were very, very important. And part of the scholastic studying of, say, Michelangelo is trying to figure out how he cataloged his drawings. These artists took and copied each other, studied each other. Again, Rubens is probably the most notorious case, or the most clear case of this. Would take and collect drawings of other artists. And then quite often he would correct them. But he studied everybody. People you wouldn't, were way, way less than he was. Study their drawings, look at them, see what he could get by taking and copying their masters. Knowing the form completely. Today we've got it sort of backwards. Everybody starts out trying to draw from the model, trying to copy what they see out in front of before they really know how to draw. The first thing is to learn how to draw and then take and do something with it. Okay. Getting slightly overworked here. Okay. Another thing we could do to this, if we wanted to take and play around with it some more, you can actually come back in with a chamois, wipe some of this stuff down, softened it up, play with it. Drawing is never really done. It's really a process. It's a process of taking and discovering and learning.